Good day, class. Selamat tinggal, class. Again, I am John Michael. Nama saya John Michael, or just call me Teacher JM. So I am your teacher intern from the Philippines. It's nice to meet you again. How's your day? Bagaimana harimu, class? Now, before we proceed on our lesson for today, let us have a short recall about our last week's lesson. Last time you learned about the adverbs of frequency, right? Here are the examples of adverbs of frequency. Do you still remember the song that we sang last week? Alright, so to remember this adverb of frequency, let's sing the song again. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Sometimes kadang-kadang, really itu jarang. Usually biasanya often sering. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Sometimes kadang-kadang, really itu jarang. Usually biasanya often sering. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Sometimes kadang-kadang, really itu jarang. Usually biasanya often sering. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Always selalu never tidak pernah. Sometimes kadang-kadang, really itu jarang. Usually biasanya often sering. Alright, very good. So last meeting, we defined the adverbs of frequency. Adverbs of frequency are often used to indicate routine or repeated activities. So they are often used with the present simple tense. Last week, we ended in this slide. So now let's look at an example of present simple sentence. Mark usually plays mobile game in his free time. If you notice, in the sentence, we already used the adverb of frequency, which is usually. So our formula for present simple tense with an adverb of frequency will be subject plus adverb of frequency plus the verb plus the object. So to be specific, how do we position adverbs of frequency in a sentence? First rule is that the usual position of the adverbs of frequency is before the main verb. Now let's look at the formula. Subject plus adverb of frequency plus the main verb. Now let's look at the examples. I always play tennis. So the girl in the picture is 100% playing tennis because the adverb of frequency used is always. Next is, my parents often go on holiday to Egypt. The parents in the picture is 70% go on holiday to Egypt because they use the word adverb of frequency, which is often. So the second rule is that when a sentence contains more than one verb, we will place the adverb of frequency before the main verb. So this will be our formula. Subject plus auxiliary verb plus adverb of frequency plus main verb. Now let's look at an example. They have often visited Europe. The word have is an example of auxiliary verb. So we place the adverb of frequency before the main verb, which is visit. So take note of the formula, which is subject plus auxiliary verb plus adverb of frequency plus the main verb. So for you to be familiarized what are auxiliary verbs, let's look on the examples. So here are the examples of auxiliary verb. Now let's have another example which use the auxiliary verb don't and doesn't. We don't often go to bed early. So we use the auxiliary verb don't, and another example is teacher JM doesn't usually clean their office. We use the auxiliary verb doesn't. So if you noticed, we use the auxiliary verb don't and doesn't, which made our sentences negative. Now let's proceed to the next lesson, which is present simple tense in negative form. So first, let's look on these examples. I don't hear the bird. She doesn't like the taste of her coffee. Now, the rule for making a present simple negative, we use don't and doesn't, as I mentioned earlier. So this will be our formula for making a present simple tense negative. Subject plus don't or doesn't plus the base form of the verb. Now, to be specific, the rule for the pronouns I, you, we, they, we use don't and the base form of verb. Now let's look at these examples. I don't eat vegetables. So the child in the picture don't eat vegetables. Are you like him? If you are, then you should probably eat more vegetables since vegetables is good for your health. Another example is that you don't look well. Next is we don't like maths. And another example is they don't want to study. So look at these examples clearly, okay? If the pronouns is I, you, we, they, we will use don't plus the base form of the verb. Now another rule for the pronouns he, she, it, and a name of a person or things, we use doesn't plus the base form of the verb. So as you can see in the formula, here are some examples. He doesn't need a new bike. She doesn't want to play. It doesn't want to eat the food. Teacher JM doesn't have enough time checking papers. So that's it for our lesson. Now, from the lessons we've tackled, present simple tense and adverb of frequency helps us to know how often we do our actions. Present simple tense give us information about our habitual actions. For example, Mark plays mobile game in his free time. Another example is, I don't like vegetables. So that is an example of positive and negative form of present simple tense. Now it tells us about the habitual action of Mark, which plays mobile games. From the example, Mark plays mobile game in his free time. Now in adverbs of frequency, it also used to indicate routine or habitual activities, so they are often used with the present simple tense. Now for example, Mark usually plays mobile game in his free time. So is that clear? Now that's all for today, class. Terima kasih banyak.